Now, from the moment y'all have been waiting for, after taking the time and carefully evaluating each of my top 4 schools, I feel the best place for me to commit to play during my college career would be.
Who you with?
All right.
Who you with?
The University of Tennessee.
Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Pipe Wrench, and by Junk Be Gone, and by the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Junk Be Gone studios for today's edition of the Sports Source. I thought it was going to be a happy fun ride today on the show. You saw right there the #1 prospect in the country for the class of 2026 announcing yesterday that he's coming to Tennessee. We'll talk tons about that. Everything seems to be going swimmingly with the Vols right now until this morning when Jourdan Thomas was announced as being out for the year. So we'll discuss that. Ryan Callahan was over there at practice. We'll get his takes on what came out of there today. Matter of fact, he'll be here to cover the recruiting as well. The rest of us are just going to be backup singers to Ryan today. But we do have a ton of information for you, and we think it's going to be a good show. So let's just dive right into it. First segment of our program brought to you by our friends at Junk Be Gone. Nobody beats East Tennessee's #1 junk removal service. That's because Junk Be Gone has more dumpsters and trucks than anyone. They got great crews. And they offer same-day junk removal when you need it. And if you're wondering about the cost, they'll give you a free estimate. Call the best. Call Junk Be Gone. I do it at least once a year. JunkBeGone.biz to learn more. All right, let's welcome in the panel today. There we go, the lead singer, Ryan Callahan from GoVols247.com. I usually don't have time to give everybody, we just do it with graphics. But since 3 of you are with 99.1 The Sports Animal, very, very simple here. As Ryan's backups, Will West, Tyler Ivins, Josh Ward. What were you going to say?
Thank you for having me.
Very good. See you and you tomorrow on radio at 3:30.
Absolutely.
All right. Last week, it always works this week. Last week we showed you Tennessee over the last 3 years in terms of bringing in 4- and 5-star talent. Well, they were 10th out of the current SEC schools. Throw Texas and Oklahoma. Not going well. What's up with that? Immediately, they go on a heater, and they are bringing in players left and right. They've climbed, and we'll talk about this, they've climbed way up into the top 10 in 24/7's rankings. But yesterday, they get the commitment from Faison Brandon, #1 player in the 2026 class from Greensboro, North Carolina, and a 5-star quarterback. Ryan Callahan, tell us about the quarterback. Tell us how they got him.
Well, obviously, huge pickup here for Tennessee. It goes without saying, anytime you're getting the #1 player in any class, it's actually the first time the 24/7 Sports #1 player in any class has committed to Tennessee in our 15-year history. So,
wow.
Been a few guys ranked #1 on other sites, but never on ours. So, obviously, big-time arm. He can make all the throws. Really smooth delivery. I saw him at a camp in early June. The accuracy was effortless. He looks like he's taken a big jump since even last season. First-time starter last year, 36 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 69% completion percentage. Really efficient, really accurate, and a great head on his shoulders. He reminds you a lot, demeanor-wise and a little bit style-wise, of Hendon Hooker. As Andrew Ivins, our director of scouting, said at 24/7 Sports, maybe Hendon Hooker with a higher ceiling is kind of what you're looking at.
Wow.
You don't want to say he's just a carbon copy of him, but maybe better. But that's why he's ranked #1. He's got that kind of potential down the road. And the most exciting part, he just turned 16 2 months ago. He's young for his grade. So he's 6'3.5", 197, still getting bigger, getting better. There are a lot of reasons to be excited about this pickup for Tennessee. How they got him, they were on him from the start. First SEC offer. I think they kind of thought when they first started recruiting him, he'd almost be an under-the-radar guy to target in this class. He ends up being the #1 player in the class, and next thing you know, they're fighting off Alabama and LSU for him. So they were in position to land him kind of all along, and they were just maybe fortunate he decided to go ahead and make an early decision, but give them a lot of credit for the early evaluation they offered him before he ever started a high school game, and a few other teams did too.
The other hats on the table were Alabama, LSU, and NC State. So that's who Tennessee beat out to get the guy. Any concerns? Maybe the day has changed. Maybe I'm still thinking pre-NIL days where these guys are signing agreements. But class of 2026, 16 years old. Normally I would say how strong is this commitment? But that has changed a lot with the NIL thing. When you see commitments now, they stick a little bit better. So is there any concern here that something flips with this kid?
I don't think a huge concern. You never say never, obviously, these days, but or in any era, really. But like you said, I think a lot of these early commitments tend to stick more. Last year there was one that went sideways on Tennessee, Jonathan Eccles. That was sort of a unique situation where Alex Golish had initially recruited him. Yeah. He goes and plays for him at USF. So I think in this case, Tennessee's got a good chance of holding on to him, and there's no reason right now to really worry.
Gentlemen, your thoughts on the fact that, well, let me go ahead and put up a graphic here. Let's show you, I was about to say, the quarterbacks that Josh Heupel is now running through is unreal. Nico Iamaleava, number 1 in the 2022 class, going to be your starter this year. Jake Merklinger, number 13 in the 2024 class. George McIntyre, number 8 in this year's class, the 2025 group. And now Faison Brandon, number 1 in the 2026 class. I look at this, and I don't want to put visions of national championships in people's heads. But I look at that Clemson program that kind of came out of nowhere. And why? Because you had some elite quarterbacks. I mean, Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, I think you take those guys away. You've kind of seen this. But you take those guys away, Clemson becomes Clemson again. If you start running with this many guys, I mean, your odds of hitting are pretty good when you're getting this type of talent at the most important position. To me, the fact that it's the quarterbacks, but if you had a number 1 defensive lineman this year and a top running back next year, that's tremendous. Nobody's going to hand that back. But boy, you give Josh Heupel this kind of weaponry, that really looks good for the future, in my opinion. Am I gushing too much, or are you guys looking at this the same way I am?
I'll go ahead and bat lead off this after Ryan. That's great. And all those names you put up there are fantastic. I'll be the person, I guess,
Here we go.
who stirs it the other way. There's, in my opinion, no chance that quarterback room stays intact.
Who winds up with Lane Kiffin getting his transfer dollars?
Immediately, you show me those list of names you just had on the screen. I immediately look at Jake Merklinger, and I think to myself, and it's the orange and white game, but him and Gaston Moore kind of went step for step, and people were chanting for Merklinger, as well as Gaston Moore after the time for Nico. NIL dollars. George McIntyre, if you believe the social medias of the world, just posted a photo of Joey Halsey on a boat. So if you want to talk about who's still committed or who still looks great for future classes, you have to read between the lines and connect the dots that he seems committed. Look, I don't know Jake Merklinger. I don't know anybody in that quarterback room. But when you look at talent and what's coming in, and if you fall into place, Josh, Nico this year, Nico next year, who falls in line if Nico leaves for the draft, who's next? Maybe it's too easy or maybe it's coincidental, but I think to myself, that'd be great if they stay together. I don't know if it's possible in today's age.
But here's the thing. I wouldn't count on all those guys staying. I don't think it's going to be like Shark's Teeth where they all play 1 year and move on. But let's say you keep 3 of those.
Still great.
So you got 1 for 2 years, 1 for 2 years, and 1 for 2 years. You're still swimming in pretty good waters there, in my opinion. But Josh, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, so let's assume...
Are you positive or are you negative?
Yeah. You never want to bring in a bunch of quarterback talent. I think Tyler's right on that one.
Clearly. Last thing to do.
Yeah, I think there's the big picture of the statement it makes about the program, and then there's the quarterback conversation, which we're having right now. So let's say it works out with Nico, and he's as good or close to what Tennessee expects him to be over the next couple of years, and he goes pro after 2 seasons. You have a competition with at least a couple of those guys that are very highly touted, very talented, and should fit in the system. Now, one's a freshman if we're projecting to 2026 with Faison coming in. But with Josh Heupel's offense, and if Nico has panned out, then the benefit of the doubt is even stronger for the next group that is competing. So there's the profile that has been created with Tennessee's recruiting, and then there's the on-field result that has a much better chance to succeed because it was just a few years ago, still not been that long since we were talking about a quarterback position that needed a lot more talent to come in and had some real growing issues.
Yeah, look, Tyler's right that they're not all going to stay, but I say who cares? Because when we've seen this in the past from other schools, it worked out pretty well. USC in the 2000s, that went pretty well. Yes, the guys transfer, absolutely. Ohio State somewhat recently. That's gone pretty well. Georgia's done that. And they ended up losing, Justin Fields to Ohio State because they couldn't play everybody they had. Yeah. This is a good problem to have, not a bad problem to have.
Agreed.
I think the big thing behind it, though, is that there's a lot of hype around Nico. And so I think Heupel, they've done a good job of identifying them. They've proven they can at least put a guy into the pros. But part of it, these are kids, right? And so they see this hype around Nico. I don't know that there's another quarterback right now in college football that's as hyped as Nico is. He was 11 of 19 in the Citrus Bowl. And he had a good game. That's fine.
Yeah, he had a good game for a first game, but it wasn't 35 of 38.
Yeah, he's like number 6 in the Heisman odds right now for a guy that threw 19 passes.
Well, let me ask you this. We'll wrap the segment with this. What has played the biggest role in getting these? And we'll start with you. What has played the biggest role in getting all these quarterbacks in here? Is it the fact that UT and Spire at the time wisely, they took the gamble? They said, we're going all in on this 1 5-star quarterback. We're making the biggest splash in NIL. We're going to get people's attention. And he's been in the national attention ever since. I don't know if he's not the $8 million man. Is he getting this kind of attention? Was it that? Or was it the fact you put Hendon Hooker in the NFL, you put Joe Milton in the NFL, who apparently is going to be the starter for the Patriots? Is it the fact that you're getting the NFL guys? Is it just the offense? Or is it all together? That's too easy. Give me which one you think is most important.
Well, when I saw this question, I was going to say it's the offense and the success of the quarterback position. I thought you were going to ask kind of NIL versus other stuff, how well they're recruiting. But I think it's the idea that Tennessee has this. They have something to sell now at the quarterback position and on offense. They didn't really a couple of years ago. Nico kind of took that leap of faith, and to your point, Nico plays a role in this too, because whoever comes in now has a chance to be his successor. You've got a line of succession now. But yeah, I think the big thing is these guys wouldn't be coming, regardless of the NIL, regardless of anything else. If Tennessee went 7-6 last year, they're probably not getting these types of quarterbacks. It's that they now have a winning program, a good offense, and they all think they can get to the NFL because, hey, Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton got there. If I'm a big-time quarterback, I think I'm better than those guys. So if they can get them drafted, they can certainly get me drafted.
I think it's the lore. I think that part of college football, one of the things there is that there is a lore around certain players. You say the word Herschel in the South, we all know who you're talking about.
Peyton.
Even if you're not even alive. Tim Tebow, look at his numbers the last 2 years. They were pretty similar to Joe Milton's last year, and I know people who covered the sport for 40 years who think he's the greatest college football player of all time. So it's just when you have lore, there's something about that comes with that, and I think these kids, Nico has that. I think these kids want to be the next guy that has the Johnny Manziel, that all of those things that can make them a superstar, regardless of what their output is on the field.
Quickly, guys, go ahead.
Yes, Cash. If you have shown that you can go out there and go all in with a coach like Josh Heupel, a system like Ryan brought up, and you can make me money in my time before I go to the NFL, Gaish, that works too.
If we go to the two most recent, so you get George McIntyre and then Faison Brandon in back-to-back classes, part of it's a little bit of fortune, but they kind of went all in of, hey, George McIntyre, in-state quarterback, we want you to be our guy. And then talking about the evaluation of Faison Brandon, if you beat out the schools to be first in line for him and you create that relationship. So I think Josh Heupel and Joey Halsley, quarterback coaching, running the offense and coaching the quarterbacks, I think that is very desirable to the quarterback that's coming in.
I think the other thing fans should be happy about, and we'll see how it turns out, but I just think this is a much more stable way to run a program than what Lane Kiffin is having to do. I would rather have 4 guys knowing that some of them are knowing that the guys I choose not to go with are going to transfer out, rather than sit there and be the guy who's like, okay, where am I going to find my quarterback next year? I got to go in a bidding war for a transfer who may not fit, or who I haven't coached before, who may not fit in. You don't have to worry about that. You're bringing these guys in, you're created a culture, they fit the culture. I just think it's very positive. So when we come back, the overall recruiting, we'll show you what they've done since the start of July. Has Tennessee turned a corner? I mean, there were questions. I asked them. Lots of people asked them about this coaching staff. Are they made by NIL, or are they really good recruiters? Have they turned a corner, or are they just on a heater right now? We'll discuss that. Come on back on the Sports Source. Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by A.G. Hines Company. Cultured stone, Drive It, Nudura. They have all kinds of cutting-edge building materials, things that you can use to make your home more energy efficient, more cost efficient when you build it, more long-lasting. A.G. Hines Company has been building homes and offices, and supplying the supplies for it at least, for more than 100 years. Construction companies and do-it-yourselfers like yourself. So if you've got a project that's on the books before the weather turns, start it with A.G. Hines Company. Go down to Hines Street in downtown Knoxville. They'll set you right, and they'll help you get that thing done the right way. A.G. Hines Company. All right. Take a look here in terms of the Volunteers and their recruiting since July. So you got 5 guys in July, you got 1 in August. These are all 24/7 rankings. So when you're sitting there going 3-star, blame Ryan. He's the one grading them at his national office in New York. But anyway, you see there you've got a receiver, linebacker, safety, tight end, defensive line. You're all over the board. It's not just offense anymore, which is one of the things that I was very much concerned about. You look at this, Will, and you can say, all right, they've turned the corner. I mean, there's been talk about this staff and Josh Heupel that has been, they're okay recruiters, but they really needed the NIL. If it weren't for NIL, they wouldn't be that great. Has something changed here? Have they turned a corner and this is, you're going to be a top 10 team from here on out, the way you were in the 90s? Or is it still too soon to say that and you're like, this could still just be one heater of a moment?
I think that they have turned a corner maybe in the way that they're doing business and their ability to close. At the same time, you putting those 4 and 3 stars up against Georgia's 5 and 4 stars and expecting to close that gap. That's the one thing that I would say. So they've done a good job, but they've done it at the level of probably still being the 6th and 7th best in the SEC, which is better than being the 10th best in the SEC, right?
Well, right now you were number 6 in the nation. Yesterday, I think by last night, you were number 7 on 24/7 rankings. So that's higher than Heupel has been so far. His previous high was 10. So you're up to 7th. But the interesting thing is that was 5th in the SEC.
Yeah.
Now, you're talking about 1 or 2 players who breaks a leg, who has a fight with their girlfriend and transfers out. We don't know that kind of stuff. So you're in the ballpark with those other teams. Now, I just wondered, do you think they can stay there?
Yeah, look, I think they turned a corner last year. They signed a class on the blue chip ratio for the first time since 2019. And the corner turned last year. And then if you can continue to win, continue to put guys in the National Football League, you will continue to ascend that based on how much success you have and how well you develop your players.
Do you feel like they've turned a corner, or is this just a hot streak?
Yeah, I think they've turned a corner. I think we're seeing from last year's class to this year's class more high-profile players who saw what Tennessee did in 2022 and view Tennessee as a higher-level program than was the case when this staff first arrived and they had to make up a lot of ground in how Tennessee is perceived by recruits. Getting a highly touted quarterback early in this class, I do think has helped. And George McIntyre, which I'm sure they hope will help in 2026 in getting Faison Brandon's commitment. But they were able to bring in a ton of talented players in June. And everybody, I think, had the opinion, okay, they're getting them on campus. That's a great next step. Can they close? And they've done that in the 5-6 weeks since then. So I think what they've done so far, David Sanders hanging out there, and if they're able to close with him, which I think there's a good chance in the next couple of weeks, then I think that would further validate that they have turned the corner and they've taken recruiting to a higher level.
Tyler, you're a gambler. Is this a hot streak, or is this something that's going to last?
No, it's a trend, and it's heading in the right direction. I'm with Josh on a couple of his comments. Not only do I believe they've turned the corner, the David Sanders comment at the end. I know you want the answer now. I was going to try to cheat and say, ask me again in a couple of weeks when one particular name comes into play. So not to completely copy-paste what he just did, I remember there was a point in time, just erase it. I know this is his 4th year here in Knoxville. And I brought this up to Will earlier on our show this week. There were people who thought that this man, Josh Heupel, wasn't going to be able to recruit or be even in the ballpark of being able to compete in the college football world until this year. It was year 4, Black Cloud, Jeremy Pruitt, all the sanctions. He gets his flowers in 22 with the 11-win season. He has an okay season last year, and now the expectations with 12 teams is the college football playoff. So I think to all the national media members who said we wouldn't see the bright spots till year 4, maybe they were onto something. The bright spots, they've already come on the football field. Maybe these bright spots are not happening on the recruiting trail.
Ryan, I'll let you close this out.
Yeah,
what has changed? Whether you think this is a hot streak or a trend, follow that up with what's changed. Are they closing better? Is it they have something to sell now?
I think they have turned the corner. I think, like Will said, though, it kind of started last year. Last year, the summer just didn't go quite as well. They had some battles that went sideways on them during this stretch. This year, more has gone right in the summer. I think as for what's changed, I think maybe in some ways they've calibrated their approach better in some ways. They're a couple years in now with the NIL stuff. Maybe now you've fine-tuned your approach a little bit more, where to divide, where to put your resources and how to handle those situations, and also which players are realistic and which ones are not. Don't waste your time on players that aren't coming here. Tennessee, I think, did a good job of that in this class with a couple guys that they probably weren't going to get. So some of it's just learning from mistakes in past years, and also just having more to sell. That's part of it too, no question. 20 wins in back-to-back seasons, that they've got a lot to point to right now.
Very good, very good. All right, when we come back, Ryan was over at practice today where there was some bad news that was delivered. We'll talk about Jourdan Thomas. We'll talk about everything else that's going on over there. Any other stories that have caught our eye this week? We got to go through position battles. What are the most important spots that they still have to fill over there? Safety just got a bigger question mark on it with the Thomas news. Come on back on the Sports Source. Welcome back into the Sports Source, the segment brought to you by Parkside Cabin Rentals. Millions of people around the world all turn to TripAdvisor to help them make decisions about where to go, where to stay when it's vacation time. Well, in 2024, they gave the Traveler's Choice Award Parkside Cabin Rentals, just like in 2023. Parkside Cabin Rentals, loved by travelers the world over. It's in our backyard. Why aren't you taking advantage of this? You know, I look at it this way. I don't have my own cabin in the Smokies, but really, I do, because if I just go to Parkside Cabin Rentals, I can pick my cabin in the Smokies. Actually, it's like I've got hundreds of my own cabins up there. I just don't have to pay tax on them. And if I get tired of this one, I go back to this one. I can check the blueprint, the layouts and the blueprints right there. Well, not the blueprints, but you know what I'm getting at. You can check the layouts right there on the website. Hell, ask them for the blueprints. Maybe you want to see the in-depth way that thing's built. But Parkside Cabin Rentals, they do a great job. Check them out, parksidecabinrentals.com. All right. Time for our poll question. We want to get you involved today. We've been positive so far. Let's go ahead and put this thing up. Wow, okay. Nobody's saying cocky. The question, how are you feeling about the Tennessee football program right now? And the options, cocky with an exclamation point, confident, hopeful seems to be the leader for those people who've gone online. And then one person or two people, a couple of people have said skeptical. So we have to always have some room for the negative person. But you tell us. We want you to take your smartphone, click the QR code, vote for us. Tell us how you feel about Tennessee football, considering the recruiting and all the stuff we just talked about and turning corners and this and that, top recruits. Tell us how you feel about Tennessee. You can also go to sportsource.tv, click on polls, and vote that way. Okay. Vols kicked off fall camp this week. Had a session this morning. Ryan, you were over there. Bad news coming out of there.
Yeah, Jourdan Thomas, who's in line to be the starter at the star position for Tennessee, a third-year guy, played a lot of football already, had some injury troubles here and there, but he's played in 25 games over the past 2 years, out for the year, suffered that injury on Saturday.
ACL.
Don't know exactly what the injury, but will have to have surgery. So regardless, it's obviously not ideal news for Tennessee. They feel like they've got more depth in the secondary. That's now going to be tested a lot more. The maybe exciting silver lining to this for a lot of fans is this opens the door for maybe Boo Carter as a true freshman to have a chance to start. So is he the one that takes advantage of this? They've also got some other guys like Andre Turrentine and Will Brooks who've played the star position before, so they could move one of those safeties down, play somebody else at safety. They've got some options, but Boo Carter, I think, is where everyone's immediately going to look now.
Yeah, and you know, I'll play the role of Tim Banks here. Fans can want the young guy all they want, but as soon as he busts, whereas my unflashy veteran wouldn't have busted, they'll be screaming for my head, not Boo Carter's head. So it is another challenge because you've got questions across the secondary, as Ryan said. Thoughts on Jourdan Thomas's injury, Will West?
Yeah, not great. Look, this happened a little bit with the defensive line last year where you saw tons of depth, enough so that they could, remember, they were just shifting 4 out, 4 in like a line change in hockey. And then all of a sudden they couldn't do that when they dealt with a couple of injuries, and you saw the production drop off from the defensive line and the pass rush slowed down. So that's what I get concerned about. You finally have depth. You finally have the ability for Josh Heupel to play who he wants to play, not who he has to play. But you start dealing with an injury or two at each of these position groups, and then you find yourself in trouble, and you're right back where you were 2 years ago.
Yeah, the problem is you're going to have some of these. I mean, he won't be the last guy that goes down in fall camp. You're going to have some. You hate for it to be a guy who's had injury problems in the past, too. And also a veteran that you know what you've got. I mean, again, I get the excitement over Boo Carter, but if I'm a coach, and I think this coaching staff in particular, I like knowing that, okay, this is a known commodity. There's value in that. Anything else pop up to you guys this week? From media day, from practice, any types of stories, anything catch your eye or your ears coming out this week? Maybe not, but...
Well, yeah, media day to kick things off, and then there have been daily coach-player interactions with the media. This is a popular time to talk about guys who can make a jump. Arion Carter is a player that I think has created some buzz. William Minge just talked about his potential. I think a lot of people know about his talent and potential maybe this year to be a really good player. Chose Tennessee over Alabama. But that's also kind of representative of you show up day 1, day 2 of practice and you start to look around. And I think the team looks more athletic. They look deeper in terms of legitimate SEC athletes. How some of those young guys like Boo Carter, who might be forced into duty, how they perform right away. But it looks like a team, again, eyeball test, that is more capable of competing week in, week out in the SEC.
Any headlines catch your eye?
Yeah. Look, we're still 27 days out, and I know it's early in fall camp, so maybe I shouldn't be hovering over the red panic button. But seeing that Javonte Spraggins was being held out maybe with some rust or some let's get the knee working after how your season ended last year. Lance Hurd is already having Dane Davis taking snaps at left tackle because he's being at least fitted for a new knee brace.
Right.
And there's still large question marks about, hey, was the footwork going to improve? That's probably the reason why he had shortcomings at LSU. You don't, look, it's early, I get it. I'm not panicking for UTC, but some of these guys who have some large question marks, you would like to see them get as many reps as possible before you start leaning into, okay, so it's not UTC, but you do then have NC State. Oh, yeah, it's not Kent State, but then you do go to Oklahoma. As many reps as possible in fall camp.
One thing stood out to me, and I will credit your newsletter. I'm telling you, folks, sign up for Josh and Swain's newsletter. It's a great end-of-the-week deal. You had a quote in there that I had somehow missed from Nico Iamaleava. I thought it was interesting, talking about, oh, no, I prefer road games, which is something about everybody being against you. It helps you focus. As a young guy, my concern is, what's this young guy going to look like when he goes on the road? And he hasn't played, so maybe that opinion changes. But when you read something like that, I'm like, it's another thing that makes you think this guy's got the right moxie. Hate that word, but he's got the right moxie for this job. If you're already saying, no, I like the road. I prefer the road. Nothing against Neyland Stadium, but I like it. Helps me focus. Like, okay. That just stood out to me that you got a young kid saying that. Everything he seems to say sounds right to me. He says and acts the right way. We'll see if that carries over. I suspect it will, but that was just another example of he seems a little bit beyond his years, I guess.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to be dealing with nonsense. Like he comes in with the NIL talk attached to his name, but I haven't heard anything that's affected him. And in fact, the opposite. And Josh Heupel has said multiple times that, paraphrasing, but he's more mature, more ready for all this than Josh was at the same age. And maybe that's just him talking up his quarterback, but I don't think so. I think that's real with how Nico carries himself, and I think his teammates have seen that too.
Look at the NFL, right? Quarterbacks, you have to be a little bit of an adult. You can't be, I've always made the comment on our show, TikTok quarterback is going to fail. Will Levis is going to fail with the Titans. That or he's complete disruption at the quarterback position. Yeah. But if you're that guy that look at me as a quarterback, for whatever reason, even if it's the number 1 overall pick, that guy always fails. Nico's the opposite of that, which is what you want, right?
Yeah, I don't see him jawing at other players like Shedeur Sanders on Twitter. You know, yep. I don't see that kind of nonsense.
Spiking the flag at the 50-yard line like Baker Mayfield did, things like that. You don't see that.
Definitely mature, and I think the most exciting thing about him is people gravitate toward him. He's a natural leader, but he's not going to peel the paint off the walls yelling at people. He's not going to raise his voice, but he's great with guys one-on-one. They respect him and like him as a redshirt freshman. All that stuff. So you talk about Tennessee investing a lot in him. That's why you do it, because you could see that even in high school that he was that kind of person.
All right, very good. When we come back, let's talk about position battles. The most important ones out there. We're going to put 5 on the YP board and let these guys rank them. What are the most important must-dos for Tennessee over the next few weeks before the season gets underway? Come on back on the Sports Source. We'll start that discussion next. Welcome back in to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Southeast Termite and Pest Control. The weather is hot, sticky, and humid. It's going to be all week. You can turn your basement or your crawl space in your home just into a sweat lodge, a mess. And that becomes a breeding ground for mold. And that mold and mildew, it can fill up your vent work, and then you've got a whole other problem. And if you've got allergies, it's a huge problem. Unless you talk with the folks at Southeast Termite and Pest Control about their crawl space encapsulation services. You can read about it on their website. We've got spots running about it. Protect your home. That's really what they do. It's not just protecting it from insects and bugs getting in there. It's protecting it in terms of crawl space encapsulation as well. It actually protects your home, keeps the floors good, keeps the vents good. SoutheastTermite.com to learn more. All right, back with the boys, and we have right back here our big orange whiteboard. And on this whiteboard, you can't see it from there, but if we can go to camera 7, perhaps we'll get it here. I'm going to move up. You can't really see it because we got a graphic there. And if we drop the graphic, there we go. Now you can see left guard, running back, safety, tight end, and wide receiver. We're going to vote on what's the most important fill for Tennessee. What slot do they have to figure out? And we'll rank them like this. And notice, this is number 2 running back. If you're sitting there going, well, you got Dylan Sampson. Yep, number 2. So number 1 left guard, number 2 running back, number 1 safety, number 1 tight end, number 1 receiver. I'm just going to throw it out there. Whoever wants to jump in first, what's the biggest must-do on that list in fall camp?
Left guard. I am a New York Giants fan. I've seen us win with O.J. Anderson a Super Bowl, right? Like, you can have a mediocre running back, and if you've got a great offensive line, it'll make all the difference. So I think left guard's number 1.
And you don't know who it's going to be. You got 4 options there.
Right. And I'm looking at just making the comment. You asked me what were some of the early things I'm noticing last segment at camp. Injuries on the offensive line. Injuries on the offensive line. Who is your left guard? And the number 1 guy who I believe it should be, Andre Keurig, has done nothing but be injured since he came from Texas. Find health. I know it's not a magic potion that's out there, but I'd like to see Keurig be able to take that job. And if it's not going to be him for the 3rd year or the 2nd realistic year, somebody else please emerge.
I went ahead and moved left guard up there because I agree with you two, so that means the other two, if you debate that, you're outvoted. So 3 votes put it up there. But Josh and Ryan, your thoughts on left guard. Is that the number 1 position to you, or is there something else that should have been number 1?
So I was going to go safety, then left guard. So left guard would be very high on the list. I have an overall question about the defensive backfield. You have young corners with good talent. We also have an injury now to Jourdan Thomas, which affects the star position. He could move to safety if they needed to get Boo Carter on the field. That's no longer an option. So I would have gone safety than left guard, but it's very close.
I would have gone safety over left guard, too. I think safety is a concern. I think fans need to really prepare themselves for the reality that Will Brooks could open the season as a starting safety. He's not the most athletic guy in the back end, but I think there's a lot of trust there. He's played some football already, so I think that getting that position figured out, and now you've got to worry about the star position on top of that. So if you're going to do any experimenting, moving around, you've got to figure that out too. So I think safety is really important. Andre Turrentine, I think you feel pretty good about, but next to him, I think there's a big question mark.
This is why Ryan's the lead singer.
Very much so.
Would you guys have been okay with safety?
No, because I don't think that Josh Heupel's had a single quality safety since he's been here.
No, I meant would you be okay with it being the number 2
I would not.
on this list?
I would not.
Okay,
I would say running back is next.
Hold off. Would you say okay with safety or no?
And I won't even go running back either.
Okay, if you're saying no, then I'm falling in with the other two to make this easier.
Okay.
We're doing this the easy way, folks.
John likes breaking the ties.
There we go. Left guard and safety are our number 1 and number 2 issues. Now, I'll let you two debate and we'll take it from there. What were you? Well, you started. Where were you going to go?
I was going to go wide receiver.
Okay, wide receiver, the number 1 receiver. All right, what you were going to go number 2
I would go running back.
See, I said that on radio with you guys this week. Number 2 running back, big for me. So I'm with him, but go ahead.
Oh, I say that, go ahead, because I know
Cam Seldon, there's a lot of people that
Seldon's-
believe Cam Seldon's going to miss multiple weeks in the season. And if that's the case, then who is
I personally
playing
believe Cam
running back?
Selton, the target back for Cam Selton, realistically, injury is Oklahoma. And I think they might even push it to the open date, hoping he's ready for Arkansas. So you need a full month of probably a backup behind Dylan Sampson. Now me saying that out loud, to hell with it. Let's move the running back up.
we got another running back. What are you doing?
I was going to go wide receiver.
Okay, so see, let's not move too fast. Now there's 2 receivers, 2 running backs. What do you do?
I'm going running back. I think that's the concern because you've got to worry about pass protection with that. You got to keep Nico healthy. A guy misses a blitz pickup, he could be taken down hard. So I'm worried about who that number 2 running back is. Is it Deshaun Bishop? Is it Cam Seldon? And if it's Seldon, when is it? Is it Peyton Lewis as a true freshman? You got to figure that out and make sure you trust whoever it is in pass protection.
Okay, then that'll be the end of this segment. We'll put running back up here. We got receiver and tight end still to discuss. I threw out tight end on the radio this week. Not a lot of people are talking about it because it's a tight end. You don't have one. So we'll discuss tight end, receiver. Is there anything we left off that list? That's all coming up in the next segment as we continue to talk about Tennessee's position battles. Much more to come on today's show. Come on back on the Sports Source. Welcome back to the Sports Source, the segment brought to you by Madisonville Marine. Man, they've got all kinds of boats, and it's all different styles of boats. So many times someone decides, I want to get a boat, and then they consult with their spouse, and the spouse says, well, I like this kind of boat. I want to do this with that boat. And then the kids say, oh, I want to do this with the boat. And you're kind of stuck. You've bought a boat, and it really doesn't fill everybody's needs. That's why at Madisonville Marine you have a crew that is, the number one target isn't just to sell you a boat, is to put you in the right boat so you'll keep coming back to Madisonville Marine. People have been doing that since 1976 because they help you find the right boat. Get down there and visit them, Highway 411 North in Madisonville. They'll take very good care of you. Joe Special and his crew are just great people, as are all the people in Madisonville. Shout out. Get down to Madisonville and see them this week. There is no better place to buy a boat. All right. We are continuing to rank the position battles. If we get a shot here on 7 of me, we got the number 1 left guard spot, the number 1 safety spot, and the number 2 running back spot. Those are our top 3 questions. I know what's coming next. It's going to be wide receiver, and then we'll talk about tight end because I'm going to lead that charge. But since everybody here is thinking wide receiver, I assume.
Nope.
I hadn't said that.
Okay, really?
Yeah,
really?
right, and I didn't say that.
Okay, well then we'll hold off. We'll let the debate rage on. You guys were going to go wide receiver.
Yes.
So tell me why. Convince this crew of why wide receiver.
Why wide receiver? You're not sure with Brew coming back how healthy he's going to be. He can look the part. He can look great on a treadmill without crutches. Chris Brazzell, great that he was an all-conference player in the AAC. Can he do it in the SEC? Squirrel White, can he do the lifting by himself? And can Mike Matthews emerge? Can some of those other pieces like Dante Thornton, who you want? Yeah, there were question marks. Yeah, maybe perhaps passes were on the back pocket from Joe Milton last year. Case of the dropsies and uncertainty, that to me is a larger question mark.
Yeah, last year's group was really disappointing. They have to bounce back this upcoming season. A lot of what we talk about with Tennessee's offensive potential is around Nico. He's got to get some help. He makes a throw in the bowl game. Great throw where the ball needs to be toward the end zone, but the receiver wasn't there. So there is a lot of potential. I keep using that word, but this group has the chance to be really good. They just have to show that. And there are questions like Bruce health. Let's see him back out there. But guys emerging. Chris Brazzell is a transfer from Tulane. He has to prove it. So I think the high-end chances for this wide receiver group is ahead of running back. But the way last season went was a real disappointment. They need to bounce back in a big way.
I want to just sneak something small into the guy that's to your right. You actually pointed it out to me on the air, too, about some of these wide receivers not finishing their routes and being as crisp. The routes were dying, and then perhaps maybe the strong finish could have got them in front of the defender. You pointed that out, and I concur with you, and I'm surprised that you're not going wide receivers with us on this as well, because that was a huge point you pointed out
I think that you brought in Brazzell for this, and you don't have other options. The wide receivers are what they are, and you're already in a position, in my opinion, that you have more mouths to feed than you probably have footballs to throw around. So that's why I think tight end.
Okay, hang on 1 second. I forgot to remind people of the poll. Our director had it up there. Click the poll. Let us know what you're saying. We do have some people who've gotten cocky about Tennessee football, and it looks like we've moved from hopeful to confident.
Yes.
Let's take
Hopeful to confident, and skeptical keeps dropping. So that's good. Keep voting, folks.
Let's take this poll the week of the opener. Those cocky numbers will creep up.
And then after the first loss, right down the end. Ryan, tight end wide receiver.
So, okay, let me clarify. Is this finding a number 1 receiver, or is this all of the wide receivers as a whole?
I think it's more about finding a number 1 receiver, but
because see, if that's the answer,
you guys have taken it as just receivers in general.
Yeah.
So if it's finding a number 1 receiver, that's at the bottom for me. I think finding a starting tight end is more important, and it's more of a question mark to me. To Will's point, I think you've got depth at receiver, you've got talent. It's just a matter of who's going to sort of emerge, and it may be a different receiver each week that's your best guy. Some weeks Squirrel's your go-to guy. Other weeks Chris Brazzell's going to have a big game. Mike Matthews might be a factor by the end of the year. Dante Thornton looks improved. So I think you've got options there. Chaz Nimrod had a nice offseason, it sounds like. So you've got plenty of bodies.
Webb got in games last year.
Yeah.
I mean, you know the names at receiver.
Yeah.
At tight end, you don't know the names.
At tight end, and sort of
in terms of proven here.
Sort of like my Will Brooks comment earlier, for all the talk of Holden Stays being the big transfer addition and Ethan Davis being a highly touted high school prospect, Miles Kitzelman might be the starting tight end. And that's going to surprise a lot of people, but I think there's some real consideration that he's kind of more the all-around tight end, more farther along maybe right now, that he's the guy. So I think you've got to figure out that tight end position.
Yeah, none of those guys are proven here, whereas receivers, if worse comes to worse, you know you've got guys. I don't know what you've got at tight end. I mean, I have no clue.
Also, I need to be able to run the football in Josh Heupel's offense, and the tight end is going to help me a lot. And a lot of it's what they do with the H-back tight end.
Right.
Their running game is predicated on that.
And the Princeton Fant role really didn't get filled last year. The guy who can just be the gadget guy who can do a little bit of everything. Yes.
I've been sold. I'll go tight end over wide receiver.
Hey, there we go.
Really, or are you just going along?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I still think finding a number one guy at wide receiver is important, but I'll go tight end ahead of wide receiver.
I'll go back to what Ryan's comment was. If it was to find your number one guy, you throw it, you go get it, then yeah, I would put tight end ahead of it. But that room, as depth is growing for Kelsey Pope, there is still giant uncertainty. So individually, you're right. As a group, I'd flip-flop them. So, Ryan, that clarity, I'm with you on that.
Here, be the TV guy and point to these.
Yeah.
Just stick your hand in. There you go. So, number one, left guard. Safety, number two. Running back, the number two running back is the third spot. Tight end, fourth. Wide receiver came in last, but at least, thank you, Thing. That was excellent. All right. Very good. Appreciate it. When we come back, one national voice has the Vols in the playoff. Cool. Ooh, but the path in that playoff is brutal. Our national championship's going to be easier because more teams get in, or harder because that playoff's tough? Coming back, we'll show you where they have the Vols projected, and then we'll answer that question. Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Daniel Hood Roofing. Before you ever see a water stain on your ceiling, folks, you could be having a leak upstairs in your attic. Roof hides the roof. If it's done right, it can actually hide some of the damage from a leak. That's the problem, because you're not going to see it coming down into your home enough to where you'll know something's wrong up there. You can get around that by getting a free inspection through Daniel Hood Roofing. They do a great job, and if they find something, they're going to show you photos of it. I had somebody this week who had them out to find an issue, and they found an issue and showed them the video and the photos. You're holding your hand up, Tyler. Are you familiar with this?
Because Daniel Hood has done my roof before after storms 2 years ago. Came on my roof, showed me everything that was wrong with my shingles. They were in, they were out, they got it done in 2 days. My neighbor saw how quick they did the work. He did a second job in my neighborhood. Haven't had a single issue with my roof since Dan Hood was on and off my roof.
There you go. Tyler Evans, thank you very much. I'll just let you come in and do the Daniel Hood mentions every week.
Yeah, Bill
Perfect.
me.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
All right, very good. Let me show you the poll results. I think we went to those. Yeah, there we go. Cocky winds up with 7%, skeptical at 6%, but 87% of you are somewhere between hopeful and confident, and more than half of you are confident. So everything's feeling good. Everything's feeling good. I think that probably signing the number one player in the country yesterday boosted that a tad, but everything feeling right now in Big Orange country. The Vols are in the playoff, but it's a tough path, according to J.D. Pickle from On3. If we can get the graphic, I think we have his bracket lined up and we can show you that. But there you go. He has Tennessee getting in as the 5th team from the SEC. He has them in as the 11th seed, but they would be getting in behind Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas, Alabama is the 10th seed, Tennessee the 11th seed. But here's the thing that stood out, is that path. If Tennessee got in there, they would have to go win at Ohio State. Then they would have to go beat Miami at a bowl site. Then they would have to go beat Oregon at a bowl site. And then they would have to go beat Georgia, wherever the championship game is this year, that they bid that thing out. It's not well, it could be a bowl site, but that's a tough ask. Ohio State, Oregon, Miami, Georgia. Everyone right now is talking about the fact that when the playoff came around, you had so many people, this opens it up. 12 teams now get a shot at it. It's going to be easier to win a national title this way. When you look at what you have to do to win it, and let's say you're seeded. You're not having to do one of the road games to start or something. You still got 3 of those. You would still have to go through Miami, Oregon, and Georgia, for example, or Texas and Georgia or whatever. Is this going to be an easier way to win a national championship with the playoff system, or is it going to actually be a harder way to win a national championship?
Josh, you get a seat at the table, but the players that you have to go through make obtaining a championship a touch more difficult. No, you're spot on. This is very, very difficult. To the graphic you just put up, let's just break it down based on quarterback play. For you to win a national championship, if that was to come to fruition, you would have to go through Will Howard, Cam Ward, Dylan Gabriel, who right now is your odds-on favorite to win the Heisman Trophy, and some guy named Carson Beck. No. I wouldn't say it's substantially harder, but I would say based on what we're used to seeing in 4 teams, add 12, there's just more variables. So, of course, more difficulty.
Yeah, Tennessee's toughest regular season stretch, in my opinion, is at Arkansas, Florida at home, Bama at home. The playoff stretch is a little bit tougher.
Steroids. Yeah.
So to your question, technically it's easier because if you're the 11 seed in a 4-team playoff, then you don't even get in, you don't get a chance.
Sure.
But easy is not the word to be using here if you're trying to be in that position, 11 seed to 10 seed. When I looked at that, my initial thought was that really is going to back up the conversation in mid-October through November of seeding and playoff positioning is going to be really important because you have a chance, and if Tennessee's offense is as good as it's capable of, then we're going to talk about them having a chance. But going to Columbus and then having to beat legitimate playoff teams on neutral sites is a big ask.
That was what I noticed
first.
4
straight weeks.
Going to the shoe.
That's just using Tennessee and this as an example. I think that's the same for everyone. I mean, you look at it, look at Michigan last year. Their schedule was not tough. They marched through their conference. They won their conference title game. Then they only had to win 2 games in the playoffs. Okay. So you played, 4 good games all last year? 4?
Fair.
Ohio State, and then your conference championship game, and then 2 playoff games.
I would argue
you get
the
4
Iowa
in the
game.
playoffs. Okay, you get 4 in the playoffs here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just, it used to be in the old system, you could still maybe sneak in, I guess. Like, I would say Michigan in this deal would have a much harder, and that's the best team in the country. I'm not knocking Michigan. I'm just saying you would have to see a lot more from Michigan in this system than you even saw last year when they won it. Because for them to go through another game on top of that, well, you would have played more tough games in your playoff than you would have in your regular season.
Very fair. To that point, whether it was Penn State,
Michigan,
I get what you're saying.
You know
Comparable, yes. You like the fact that you get the opportunity because you're there. Yeah. You're at the table. You're having dinner. But to say that you have to then, as you put it, neutral site, home games, that to me, and then as frequently, nobody's really looked at, if you have or you haven't, look at the schedule this year, too, of how closely they're putting those games together.
Yeah.
It's not just like, cool, we just beat Ohio State at the shoe. Now we get 14 days to get ready for Miami in a neutral set. No. Next week, let's go. Next week, let's go.
And it's different from the NFL as well because so many of those NFL teams, it's not like night and day from offense to offense. They are all kind of similar. Whereas there's a big difference between what Michigan runs and what Tennessee runs.
100%.
And if you play Michigan one week and Tennessee the next, that's not going to be an easy transition if you've got 8 days between games to figure it out.
I think there are a lot of fans that are excited right now and will be excited if their team gets into the playoff, and then will do a lot of complaining once they get in the playoff with what the draw might ultimately be.
Yeah, I think whoever wins is going to be doing some serious work. All right, when we come back, we're going to be talking about the defense versus the offense. I read again this week. I keep reading this. If Tennessee is going to make the playoff, they're going to have to fix that defense. Fix that defense. Was the defense the problem last year? Let's come back and debate that next. Come on back on the Sports Source. Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Safety Systems. If you're in need of a new security system for your home or for your business, call VFL JJ Surlis and the team at Safety Systems. Folks, they take care of you. They also do the life safety systems, the fire safety systems. So if you are building a restaurant, if you are building an apartment complex, if you are building any kind of business, you have to have the fire safety in there, and you have to have it tested on a regular basis. Safety Systems also does the testing. You get in touch with them, they take care of you for the long haul. SafetySystems.com, you'll find their sign in my front yard because I'm a believer in them. I use them. I love them. SafetySystems.com. All right. Some Vol fans scream for Tim Banks' head after every loss. And this offseason, I've continued to read, as I just said in the tease, I keep saying, well, if they're going to make the playoff, they're going to have to fix that defense. Okay. I'd seen enough, and I was like, let's just look at the numbers. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I feel like I'm on this other planet. Let's see if I'm right or wrong. So I went and looked at the numbers. Take a look at this. This shows you what the defense looked like, Tennessee's defense. Scoring defense, rush defense, pass defense, red zone defense, third down defense. You see it in 2021 when they first got here. Awful. 12th, 8th, 14th, 2nd, 12th, 13th. Then it got better in 2022. Then it's top 3 or 4 in the league last year. You are 3rd in scoring defense, 4th in rush defense. Your worst element is pass defense, which everyone acted was terrible. It's middle of the pack. 4th in red zone defense, 7th in third down defense. Okay, maybe I was on to something here. Maybe it isn't the defense that's the problem. In fact, Let's take a look at the offense last year. This was the issue in my mind. Look at Tennessee's scoring in their 4 losses last year. 16 against Florida, 20 against Alabama, 7 against Missouri, 10 against Georgia, and look at the scoring offense by year. 39 points a game in his first year, 46 points a game in Heupel's second year. He was down 2 touchdowns last year. You guys can debate this with me. You can tell me if I'm wrong. But all the Tim Banks scrappy, they may go out and stink this year. It may be all on the defense this year. But going into this season, I don't think they have to fix their defense to make the playoffs. I think they have to fix their offense to make the playoffs.
100%. If you look at the opponent's yards per game that Tennessee had last year, Tennessee was ranked ahead of Florida State and Texas. They allowed fewer opponents' yards per game than Florida State and Texas, and Florida State's defense is what had them at a playoff point, right? Yeah. Texas was in the playoff. Tennessee ranked ahead of them. So, no, the defense wasn't the problem whatsoever last year.
I realized that recently when I heard some national people talking about Tennessee's defense kind of gradually getting better or needing to still get better under Josh Heupel, and I realized I don't think the perception's caught up to the reality, and you showed it right there. Everyone still thinks of Tennessee as this high-powered offense, and they think of Tennessee as having a kind of mediocre defense with James Pierce.
At best.
James Pierce and not a whole lot else. They don't realize that with this veteran defensive line that we've talked about so much all offseason, Tennessee's been really good against the run 2 years in a row. They were third in the SEC last year against the run, or fourth, third in scoring defense. They forget Tennessee beat Texas A&M in a 20-13 game. That showed they can win with defense. So they've come a lot farther than people realize. I think they were 27th or so nationally in scoring defense. So top 30-ish. That's a pretty good defense. So,
but the second part of your thesis to me is key. Yep. You have to fix the offense,
and I think you will. I think a lot of that offense goes back to one issue.
And see, that's why I think people have the right idea. They just don't have the right narrative. The idea is that Tennessee might be a borderline playoff team this year. The reason for that, though, is because they've had the defense last year. The front seven still should be pretty good, and now you've got the offense, you think, in better shape to have a big year. So you should have the two working together for the first time.
Yeah, and I think people expect you to go out and not give up more than 14 points a game ever. I remember a few years ago when they beat Alabama 52-49. It's like, well, you gave up 49 points to Alabama. Yes, and they gave up 52 to you. Yeah. That's a victory. That's a win. That's what college football is now. Yeah. There's not a defense in the country, unless you're playing a really scrubbed schedule, that isn't going to be hammered one game. You're just not going to show up for 12 straight games and hold the opponent down. A lot of these teams, whether it's Nick Saban at Alabama or LSU, who Josh Heupel went in and put 40 on Brian Kelly's defense in Tiger Stadium a couple of years ago, these defenses aren't Oklahoma 1978, where, nobody scored on them in 6 weeks. So whenever they give up big points, people always scream for Banks' head. I just think the big picture, your defense has gotten better every single year. I think it's going to be decent this year. It's your offense, which is the selling point. If Josh Heupel, when he got here, we all knew the defense is not going to be the thing. It's going to be the offense. So you've got your defense playing better than I thought it would. It's your offense you got to get back on track. And last year was just a random deal compared to the rest of his year. It was the outlier compared to the rest of his years running this system, whether it was at Missouri as an OC or UCF or here. And I think we can trace it back to the guy pulling the trigger was the biggest issue.
And not being able to go tempo with that, because otherwise, if you're not going,
the same guy.
Yes, he didn't like to go tempo or wasn't comfortable doing it, so then you'd run an offense that 100 high school teams in the state of Texas have been running for 2 decades. So, I mean, of course, if, lowest division Texas high school football teams know how to defend that, I guarantee you Nick Saban does.
Well, I mean, we've talked about it before. That is, and it made people mad when it was taking off 2 years ago. Justin Hamilton, who was with us, former defense coordinator, was talking about it's a simple offense. Like, how can it be simple? They're doing this. It's the speed that makes it tough. The offense is simple. It's the speed that makes it tough. And if you can't run it as fast as you want to, and if you don't have a quarterback who can hit the deep balls, which you didn't last year, with irony of ironies, that sets you back. But to me, all this talk about, if they're going to make the playoff, they better fix their defense. You better fix the offense. Go ahead.
And I'm surprised people haven't picked up on this. Tennessee got some players from both sides of the ball in the transfer portal. All their big additions were on offense. Lance Hurd, Chris Brazzell. They had to fix the offense to make sure that two tight ends. Exactly. Yeah. So the defense was fine. They patched it up with some veterans that can play, but the high-profile additions, those were on offense. Tennessee needed to improve there, and they knew it.
Yeah. All right, very good. When we come back, the House settlement is it's calling on schools to now share revenue with their athletes, $20 million to $23 million a year. That sounds great. Everybody knows that it's great for the SEC and the big football powers. So why is one SEC coach crying? An SEC basketball coach. We'll talk to you about weeping coaches next. Come on back. All right. Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Games and Things, billiards tables, shuffleboard tables, table tennis, card tables, a lot of tables down there at Games and Things. Any kind of game you are interested in, they have it. We're talking gorgeous, upscale furniture, folks. Make your home the envy of your neighborhood and visit Games and Things this week. All right. The House settlement has opened the door to schools sharing revenue with players, at least in theory. If the House settlement is deemed legal and it passes, we'll save that for another day when it's challenged in court. But anyway, it's looking like $23 million schools will be sharing with their athletes. We all assume most of these big football powers are going to give the bulk of that cash to their football players. Okay, sounds fine. And everyone in the SEC is cheering because it helps the SEC and the Big Ten separate even further from these little have-nots, your Big 12s and your ACCs. Well, coaches at football schools are now, basketball coaches at football schools are now starting to get the sniffles over the fact that non-football schools, like the Big East, they're going to have $20 million to give the bulk to their basketball players. Here's what Alabama's Nate Oates had to say. I thought this was interesting. He needed a tissue. That's a problem, Oates said, his eyes widening at the thought. As long as it's equitable across all the high major schools, you're fine. But if one's got $22 million and one's got $5 million, that's a problem. We're not going to be able to compete. They haven't thought everything through. And I just thought, was this from Nate Oates in the SEC, or is this one of the football coaches from 80 other schools talking about the SEC? My question is simply this. Anybody out there going to be crying for any of these SEC? I mean, Tennessee's in the same boat, but is anybody going to be crying for major conference basketball coaches that suddenly the financial wave is pouring in the other direction and not in your favor? I just think it's kind of ironic. Thoughts, reactions?
Some people are going to think this is us picking on because it's Alabama. Nate Oates could be the coach at Mississippi State. This would still be laughable.
I would say if that was Rick Barnes. I'm glad Rick Barnes didn't say it.
Because you can think it, you can't say it.
That's right.
Yeah, we've said that often, and here we are now, another example. Think it, don't say it. To the Big East standpoint, I don't even think St. John's and Patino are going to do this. I don't think Kim English at Providence is going to do this. I don't think Nova and Georgetown are even. They might have the ability. I don't think they're going to do it. Nate Oates, you should have picked another pinata to whack on this one.
I just think, but the thought of it clearly has him freaking out a little bit.
The idea that Alabama or a major SEC or Big Ten school would be at a financial disadvantage when we're talking about all the money that they're
versus
making, really making. Yes, against smaller schools that clearly have all kinds of disadvantages. I think it's wonderful.
I did think that the amount of money he said that they might have, or insinuated that they might have, $5 million.
Yeah, for basketball.
That was something with Arkansas that the Athletic did. They said, well, top basketball programs spend $5 million per year. Top football programs, $13 to $20 million per year. How are they going to work this out? It seems to me that maybe Nate Oates thinks, hey, I'm getting $5 million to be able to pay my players. That's what Calipari has at Arkansas right now. Yeah, but it isn't like – we still don't know if they're not going to separate all of this money straight across the board at Title IX, right, and every single student-athlete gets $60,000.
Yep. Right.
So none of us know. Nate Oates is freaking out too early, but that's coaches a little bit. But I do think I could see a scenario where the Big East, where Georgetown, where these schools – they wouldn't give the full 22, but if they had 17, which is the minimum.
They'll have more than the football schools.
Yeah. So, but if they can give 17
That's good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. That is an advantage.
And to your point, John, if that happens, oh no, he'll have to call the collective and get them to pay the players more.
Right.
What will he ever do? He'll call somebody else to get the money. SEC schools have the resources. That's not a problem. No one's going to have any sympathy for them on that.
Exactly. I just thought it was hysterical when I read it. My eyes popped out of my head. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're actually crying that you're at a financial disadvantage? Nobody's going to be feeling sorry for you there, Nate. All right, when we come back, how one column created a national wave of misinformation about a VFL. And I bet you've seen it or heard it this week. We'll tell you what it is next. Come on back. Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Pipe Wrench. It's not hot, right? Well, it is hot right now, but fall and winter will be here soon enough. My question is your hot water heater up for another cold season? If you've had it for a while, it may not be. So if you think you're aging your aging hot water heater is starting to show issues, reach out to Pipe Wrench right now. They've got great deals on hot water heaters and installation all the time. Don't wait until winter and cross your fingers that you don't have an emergency. Do it before you have an emergency. PipeWrench.com to learn more. I've used Pipe Wrench, really liked them when I did it. You will too. PipeWrench.com. Okay, I'm not covering this because it's a Patriots thing. I've just watched it. I happen to know more because it's a Patriots thing, but I'm sure you've seen this or heard it this week that Joe Milton is going to win the Patriots quarterback job. Colin Cowherd said it on the radio. I've seen it written about that he's leader in the quarterback room. I've seen local news do it. I've seen the Sentinel pick up the stories and run with it. The only problem is I listen to a lot of Boston radio, and I thought you might want to know just how much bad information there is out there. Take a look. These are three guys who do radio in Boston. One of them's a beat writer. They're actually at practice. They're at practice broadcasting every day. Here's what their thoughts are on Joe Milton and Colin Cowherd saying he could win the job.
Again, Colin Cowherd's not here, so it's not like it's his assessment of things. But that has to be the worst opinion I've heard about the Patriots so far this season. That is it. Put that at the top of the list. It is the worst opinion I've heard yet, that Joe Milton has a shot to win the job. Joe Milton has a 0.0% chance of winning the starting job on this team. Joe Milton is in 4th place. Bailey Zappi has had a better camp than Joe Milton. And to me, if I were making the roster today, Joe Milton is not on the roster. He's either going to the practice squad or I'm letting him go.
The odds of Joe Milton actually winning the job are non-existent.
When Jacoby Brissett and then May have taken some reps, you don't even see, in certain periods, you don't even see either Milton or Zappi even get involved, right? They just move on. Like, those guys are not being treated as even in the same grouping.
No, the way I would describe it is those two are splitting third-team reps. So there are periods of practice where you don't see Joe Milton because Bailey Zappi's out there and Joe just has to sit for long, extended periods of time.
All right, so he's not going to win the job. The reason I bring this up, I'm going to get to a question. One, I'm frightened for our society because I watched this story. A columnist known as Ben Trollin Volan in Boston wrote that Milton looks as good as May. That's what he wrote. Then I saw it pop up on somebody else's story where they had written, Patriots beat writer, which this guy isn't, says Milton is the leader in the quarterback room. No, he didn't say that. Then someone else picked up on that and said he can win the job. Then Colin Cowherd runs with it. Then I see it linked to in the Sentinel. I see all 3 television stations in town run it. It's an election year, folks. Do your research on everything you read because the misinformation out there is scary. I mean, seriously, somebody in the media, it scared me to watch this go, whether he gets it or not. But I want to get to a Milton question. We've seen him here. At Michigan, he was crowned as the guy. He comes here, and we're all, oh my gosh, Joe Milton, have you seen this guy? He can throw it 1,000,000 yards. And he loses the job. Then he gets a second chance, and everybody, once again, forgetting that first round, is like, oh, have you seen this guy's arm? It's going to be so much better now. And it really wasn't. Now he's in New England, and they could watch tape from Michigan. They could watch tape from Tennessee. And still there are people that just go, look at that arm. And this columnist talked about his arm looks better than Drake May's, and he wows the crowd with his standing backflips. So my question to you guys, has there ever been a quarterback in the history of sports who has gotten more run for his look and his tool than Joe Milton? The closest I could come would be Jamarcus Russell with your Raiders. Yep. But that wasn't
this is a Patriots segment, John.
Not it's not a Patriots segment. It's a Joe Milton segment. I can't think of anybody who has more love for what he does off field than what he does on the field. Well, like he gets more hype around that stuff than what he actually delivers on the field.
Does that mean there's never been a guy who has more of the physical and intellectual tools to become a quarterback who's never put it together? That's the other thing that I look at when I think of Joe Milton is when you reverse that, is he the guy that has the most who's done the least? If you look at in our lifetime in football.
There's a reason that he's gone to Michigan and then Tennessee and now got drafted in the 6th round of the NFL. Somebody convinces themselves, and I thought this all along with Milton, someone will convince themselves, I can work with this. Yeah. I can make him better. And he's probably going to get a second chance in the NFL because of that, even if the Patriots don't keep him around.
Off Ryan's comments, when he came to Knoxville after watching him at Michigan, I said to myself, Josh Heupel's a pretty smart guy. He knows how to work with quarterbacks. He's not Tressman. He's not a quarterback whisperer. But if Josh comes in and goes, I want Joe Milton on my roster because I can fix him, and it happens or doesn't happen, as you see how it played out, I think Will's got a fair point with his rebuttal.
It's amazing. Everybody, it's like nobody watches the game tape. They just look at him throw an orange and do a backflip, and they're wowed. All right, very good. Thanks to all these guys. Thanks to you for watching. Thanks for our sponsors. We'll see you right back here next Sunday, live at 11 o'clock.